The laughter came first. Loud, careless, certain. It rolled across the bright spring air of Hyde Park like a challenge thrown before witnesses. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Fans paused mid-wave. And in the center of it all stood Lady Eliza Hartwell, her gloved hands clenched at her sides, while the Marquis of Westmere smiled at her as if she were a game he had already won. Spring of 1853 had dressed London in beauty. The trees in Hyde Park were heavy with fresh green leaves. Sunlight spilled over gravel paths and polished carriage wheels. Ladies in soft pastel gowns drifted like moving flowers. Gentlemen stood in small groups, speaking of politics, investments, and racing horses, as if the world belonged entirely to them. It was a world built on rank and reputation, a world where one whisper could destroy a family, a world Eliza knew too well. At 24, she had mastered the art of being invisible. She stood among the crowd in a simple pale blue walking dress that had once belonged to her mother. It had been altered carefully, stitched late into the night by Eliza's own hands. It was neat, but modest. Respectable, but forgettable. Just like her. 7 years earlier, she had been introduced into society with bright prospects. Daughter of the Earl of Ashford, educated, polished, promising. Then her father's debts surfaced. Gambling, mistresses, fraud. The Earl died suddenly, leaving scandal behind, like smoke after a fire. And Eliza, at 17, became the shield between disgrace and her 3 younger siblings. Since then, she had worked quietly, teaching French, sewing, accepting small paid tasks from merchant families, protecting Thomas, Catherine, and little Margaret from the worst of society's cruelty. Love was a luxury she no longer believed in. "Is that truly the Hartwell girl?" The voice carried again, deep, amused, entitled. Eliza turned slowly and met the gaze of Adrian Blackthorne, Marquis of Westmere. He was 32 and everything London admired. Tall, broad-shouldered, golden-haired. His riding coat fit him perfectly. His boots shone like glass. His brown eyes held the lazy confidence of a man who had never struggled for anything. He stood beside his black stallion Tempest, a magnificent creature bred for victory. Around him gathered other gentlemen eager to laugh at whatever entertainment he chose to provide. Eliza held his gaze calmly. "Yes, my lord," she said evenly. "I believe I am." A few ladies nearby exchanged excited glances, yet they sensed something brewing. "I had heard," Adrian continued, strolling closer, "that the Hartwells preferred quieter gatherings these days, more modest circumstances." The insult was gentle in tone, but sharp in meaning. Heat rose in Eliza's cheeks, but she refused to lower her eyes. She had endured whispers for 7 years. She would not shrink now. "We prefer honest company," she replied. "Circumstances tend to reveal who truly possesses that quality." A ripple moved through the watching crowd. Adrian's smile faltered just slightly. He was not accustomed to resistance. "Careful," one of his friends muttered under his breath, amused. Adrian stepped closer, lowering his voice though everyone could still hear. "You are bold for someone in your position." "And you are careless for someone in yours," she answered calmly. A gasp rose from somewhere behind her. Adrian's jaw tightened. Something flashed in his eyes. Not anger exactly. Interest. He had meant to amuse himself. Instead, he had found a challenge. He glanced toward the northern riding path, where the gravel curved through a line of trees. The path was wide enough for a race, though races were rarely held during polite gatherings. "Very well," he said suddenly, loud enough for all to hear. "Let us make this interesting." Eliza's pulse quickened. He gestured toward her. "Win this race and become my bride." Laughter burst from the gentleman behind him. For a moment the world seemed to still. The wind quieted. Even the horses shifted uneasily, as if sensing tension. Eliza stared at him. "Pardon?" "You heard me," he said lightly. "One circuit of the northern path. If you win, I will marry you. A marquis' name and fortune. Quite the improvement to your current situation." The cruelty was subtle but clear. He did not expect her to win. He did not expect her to accept. It was a spectacle, a joke, a humiliation wrapped as opportunity. Around them, the crowd whispered eagerly. She should refuse, walk away, protect what little reputation remained. But she was so tired of bowing her head. She looked at Tempest, then at the bay mare held by a nearby groom. Smaller, alert, steady. She had not ridden in years, not since before her father's disgrace. But she remembered the wind against her face, the strength of a horse beneath her, the feeling of freedom. She lifted her chin. "I accept." Shock rippled through Hyde Park. Adrian blinked once, then smiled slowly. "You surprise me." "I suspect I will again," she replied. Within minutes, the gathering transformed into chaos. Ladies clustered together whispering. Gentlemen hurried to place bets. A few tried to protest the impropriety, but were drowned out by excitement. Eliza mounted the bay mare with assistance. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady on the reins. The familiar weight of the saddle brought back memories she had buried. Beside her, Adrian swung effortlessly onto Tempest. The stallion pawed the ground impatiently. He leaned slightly toward her. "You may still withdraw. And you may still apologize," she said. His lips curved. "I never apologize before a race." Lady Penford, flustered but unable to resist the drama, raised a handkerchief as a signal. The crowd fell silent. The handkerchief dropped. Eliza did not hesitate. She urged the mare forward instantly. The horse leapt ahead with surprising speed. Gasps erupted behind them. Tempest thundered forward seconds later, his powerful strides devouring ground. The wind rushed past Eliza's ears. Gravel crunched beneath hooves. Her skirts pulled at her legs, but she adjusted, leaning low. She remembered something her father had once told her. Speed was not everything. Position mattered more. At the first curve, she guided the mare to the inside path, forcing Tempest to circle wide. Adrian adjusted quickly, but the slight delay kept her ahead. He laughed behind her, not mockery now, but excitement. "Well done!" he called. They burst onto the straightaway. Tempest surged forward with overwhelming strength. Within seconds, he was beside her. For one breath, they rode neck and neck. Now she glanced at him. His hair was wild in the wind, his expression alive. Not arrogant, not mocking, simply exhilarated. Then Tempest edged ahead. The finish line lay just beyond the final bend where the crowd waited. Eliza's lungs burned. The mare's breath came faster. She had one chance. Instead of pushing harder on the straight path, she saved her strength for the last curve. She leaned inward, trusting the mare completely. The smaller horse cut sharply through the turn with grace Tempest could not match. And as they burst from the curve, Tempest hesitated for half a heartbeat at the roar of spectators. Half a heartbeat was enough. Eliza and the mare crossed first. The crowd erupted. She slowed the horse gently, her body shaking with adrenaline. She had done it. She had beaten him. Adrian reined in beside her, but for a long moment he said nothing. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. Then slowly he dismounted and approached her. There was no laughter now, only intensity. "A wager is a wager," he said clearly, his voice carrying to every ear. "Lady Eliza Hartwell, I offered marriage if you won." Silence fell again. He extended his hand toward her. "I honor my word." Every eye watched her. Eliza looked at the hand, then at the man who had intended to mock her, and now stood bound by his own pride. Her victory had given her power for the first time in years. But what would she do with it? She drew a steady breath. "My lord," she said slowly, "I refuse." Shock exploded through the crowd, louder than the race itself. Adrian's hand froze mid-air. "You refuse?" "I do not wish to marry a man who offered his hand as sport," she said clearly. "But I will claim what I have earned." His eyes narrowed. "And what is that?" "Security," she answered. "For my family. An allowance sufficient to educate my brother and provide dowries for my sisters. That was your wager. I won. I choose the prize." Murmurs rose like thunder. Adrian studied her with a look no one had ever seen on his face before. Not amusement, not superiority. Something deeper, something dangerous. "You bargain boldly," he said quietly. "I survive boldly," she replied. For a long moment neither moved. Then Adrian nodded once. "Very well," he said aloud. "You shall have it." But his eyes did not leave hers. "And in return," he added softly, so only she could hear, "you will agree to one condition of mine." Her pulse quickened again. "What condition?" His voice lowered further. "An engagement." The words settled heavily between them. "False," he continued. "Temporary. 6 months. To protect us both from scandal. We appear devoted. Then we part quietly." The crowd pressed closer, waiting. Eliza understood instantly. Without such protection, society would destroy her for choosing money over marriage. He had regained control. "Win the race and become his bride," he had said. But everything had changed, and she had no idea yet whether she had truly won it all. The word engagement hung between them like a sealed contract neither of them had expected to sign. Eliza stood very still beside her mare while the crowd waited for her answer. She could feel their curiosity pressing in from all sides. Whispers were already forming. The fallen Hartwell girl had trapped a marquis. The marquis had been forced to honor a foolish wager. Adrian's face was calm again, but his eyes were sharp. He had recovered quickly. He always did. "If you refuse," he said quietly, so only she could hear, "the scandal will cling to you far longer than it will to me. Society forgives men. It rarely forgives women." It was not cruel. It was simply true. Eliza understood the rules of this world too well. If she walked away now with his money and no explanation, and she would be labeled greedy, dishonorable. Worse, her sisters would suffer for it. "How long," she asked carefully, "would this engagement last?" 6 months, he replied at once. "Long enough to satisfy gossip, short enough to dissolve quietly. And after? We announced that we discovered we were not suited." His tone was businesslike, controlled, as if they were negotiating property instead of reputation. She should despise him. Instead, she found herself studying his face. Beneath the arrogance, she saw something else now. Calculation, yes, but also respect. He did not speak to her as if she were weak. He treated her like an equal opponent. It unsettled her more than his mockery ever had. "Very well," she said at last. 6 months. We perform for society. After that, we part." His shoulders relaxed slightly. Agreed." He turned to face the crowd, lifting her hand with effortless confidence. "Lady Eliza has accepted my proposal," he announced smoothly. "We are to be married in 6 months' time." Applause burst around them. Ladies dabbed their eyes. Gentlemen laughed and congratulated him. The lie was so easily believed. Eliza forced a serene smile onto her face, while her heart pounded with uncertainty. She had secured her family's future, but she had just tied herself to a man she did not trust. That evening, when she returned home to the modest townhouse in Bloomsbury, her siblings were waiting. News traveled faster than reason in London. Thomas burst into the sitting room the moment she entered. "Is it true?" he demanded. "You are to marry a marquis?" Catherine and Margaret hovered behind him, eyes wide with excitement. Eliza closed the door gently. "Yes," she said carefully. "But listen to me. Nothing is permanent yet." She explained only what they needed to know. That an allowance had been arranged, that Thomas would attend Harrow, that Catherine and Margaret would have dowries one day. Thomas stared at her as if she had conquered the world. "You beat him," he said with pride. "You actually beat him." Eliza smiled faintly. "Yes," she whispered. "I did." But later, alone in her small bedroom, doubt crept in. 6 months. 6 months of pretending affection. 6 months of smiling beside him. 6 months of sharing carriages and dances and conversations meant to convince London that they were in love. She had not believed in love for years. It was easier not to. The next evening, Adrian's carriage arrived precisely at 8. Eliza wore a gown of deep green silk that Caroline had insisted she borrow. It fit her beautifully, though she felt like an actress stepping onto a stage. When Adrian stepped down from the carriage, candlelight caught in his golden hair. For a moment, he simply looked at her. "You look remarkable," he said quietly. "You sound surprised." "I am," he admitted. "I did not expect you to outshine the entire ballroom." The compliment felt sincere. That unsettled her even more. Lady Ashford's ball was brilliant with light and music. Crystal chandeliers glowed above polished floors. Society's finest had gathered to witness the spectacle. When Adrian offered his arm and led her inside, every gaze followed them. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "That is her. The girl who won the race. How clever she must be. How fortunate." Eliza held her head high. Throughout the evening, Adrian played his part flawlessly. He danced with her more than was required. He introduced her proudly. He kept his hand at her back with possessive ease. But it was during the second waltz that something shifted. His hand rested at her waist. Their bodies moved together in practiced rhythm. For a moment, the world narrowed to music and motion. "You are very convincing," she murmured. "So are you," he replied. "It is almost dangerous." She met his eyes. "Dangerous how?" "Because I find myself forgetting that it is pretense." Her breath caught. The dance ended before she could respond. Days passed, then weeks. Adrian visited her home regularly, always proper, always announced. He brought books for Thomas, art supplies for Margaret, sheet music for Catherine. And he listened when Thomas spoke about mathematics. He asked Catherine to play the piano. He praised Margaret's drawings with genuine interest. Eliza watched him carefully. This was not required by their arrangement. "You do not need to be kind to them," she said one afternoon after he had left. "I want to be," he replied simply. His answer lingered with her long after he departed. One morning in late May, they rode again in Hyde Park, though this time slowly. The trees were thicker with leaves now, the air warmer. You have improved your brother's education beyond what we agreed, she observed. Why? He did not look at her as he answered. Because he deserves it. She studied him quietly. You are not what I expected, and you are not what I intended, he said. She frowned slightly. I intended to win that day, he continued. Instead, I found myself challenged. You did not flatter me. You did not fear me. You refused to accept humiliation. No one does that. Perhaps they should, she said. He laughed softly. You have altered the rhythm of my life, Eliza. The use of her given name sent warmth through her chest. You are not easy to dismiss, he added. She did not know how to respond. That night she lay awake long after her siblings had fallen asleep. She thought of his voice, his steady patience with Thomas, the way he defended her subtly in drawing rooms when someone made a careless remark about her father. It would be easier if he were cruel. Cruel men were simple. But Adrian Blackthorne was not simple. The true test came at a garden party hosted by Lady Vivian Ashcroft, a woman rumored to have once hoped to marry Adrian herself. The gardens were bright with roses and music. Guests wandered between tables beneath silk canopies. Lady Vivian approached with a smile too sharp to be kind. My dear Lady Eliza, she said sweetly, how fortunate you are. From such modest circumstances to an engagement with a marquis. One might almost call it miraculous. The words were coated in honey, but tasted of poison. Eliza felt the sting, but answered calmly. Fortune favors those who are willing to take risks. Lady Vivian's smile tightened. And your father was quite a risk, was he not? All those debts. Such scandal. I wonder how Lord Westmere's family feels about the connection. The garden grew quieter. Conversation slowed. Eliza's heart pounded. These were truths she could not deny. Before she could answer, Adrian stepped forward. That is enough, he said firmly. Lady Vivian lifted her brows. I am merely recalling history. You are attempting to humiliate my fiancé, he replied, his voice steady but cold. And I will not permit it. The authority in his tone silenced the garden completely. Lady Eliza has shown more courage in 1 year than most families display in generations, he continued. Her father's failures are not hers. I stand beside her by choice, not by accident. The words struck Eliza deeper than she expected. This was not performance. There was no audience benefit in angering a powerful widow. He was defending her because he wished to. Lady Vivian flushed and withdrew under the weight of his public rebuke. The crowd slowly resumed conversation, but Eliza barely heard it. In the carriage home, she sat beside him in silence. You did not have to do that, she said finally. Yes, he replied quietly. I did. Their eyes met in the dim light. The space between them felt charged. This arrangement, he said slowly, has become something more difficult than I expected. Her pulse quickened. How so? He exhaled. Because I find myself caring whether you are hurt. The words were simple, but they unsettled her deeply. She had built walls carefully for years. And now, without warning, cracks were forming. 6 months had once seemed like a manageable deception. Now she was no longer certain what would remain when the performance ended. The carriage rolled through the quiet streets of London, the sound of wheels against stone steady and slow. Inside, silence pressed close around them. Eliza sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring at the faint reflection of herself in the darkened window. She could still hear Adrian's voice from the garden. I stand beside her by choice. It had not sounded like strategy. It had sounded like truth. You are quiet, he said at last. I am thinking. Dangerous habit. She almost smiled. "Why did you defend me like that?" she asked softly. "There was no need to risk offending Lady Vivian." He did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice lacked its usual ease. "Because I could not bear the look on your face." She turned toward him. "What look?" "The one that said you expected it." Her breath caught. "I have lived with whispers for years," she admitted. "I learned not to react. That does not mean you should endure them alone." The carriage lantern flickered as they passed beneath a street lamp. For a brief moment his face was fully illuminated. He did not look arrogant. He looked almost vulnerable. "You confuse me," she whispered. "I confuse myself," he replied. When they arrived at her house, he did not immediately open the carriage door. "Eliza," he said quietly, "when we made this agreement, I believed I could control it. Appear devoted, remain detached. We'll walk away in 6 months without consequence. And now? Now I am no longer certain I wish to walk away." Her heart began to pound so loudly she feared he could hear it. "This was never meant to be real." "I know." "Then why does it feel as if it is becoming so?" The question hung between them, heavy and dangerous. He reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to withdraw. She did not. "I have competed my entire life," he said quietly, "for approval, for reputation, for power. I always win, Eliza. Or I did. But with you, I did not wish to win. I wished to understand." She swallowed. "You do not know what love can cost," she said. "My mother loved my father, trusted him. He ruined her. I am not your father." "No," she whispered. "But you are still a man with power." "What, and I am still the daughter of disgrace." He leaned closer. "You are not defined by disgrace. You are defined by strength." Silence settled again. "I am afraid," she admitted. "So am I." She looked at him sharply. "You?" "Yes." A faint smile touched his mouth. "For the first time in my life, I care about losing something that matters." The words broke something open inside her. For years, she had told herself she did not believe in love. It was easier that way, safer. But safety had never made her feel alive. The memory of the race flashed in her mind. The wind, the risk, the choice to trust the mare and take the turn tightly. She had won because she dared. Slowly, she leaned closer. "If this becomes real," she whispered, "there is no performance, no retreat, no careful separation in 6 months. I would not want one. And if I cannot promise perfection, I ask only honesty." Her pulse trembled through her. "Then let us end the pretense," she said softly. "Not the engagement, the pretending." His breath left him in a slow exhale. "Are you certain?" "No," she admitted. "But I was not certain before the race either." A slow smile spread across his face, not arrogant, not triumphant. Hopeful. He cupped her cheek gently, his touch warm and careful. "Eliza Hartwell," he murmured, "I am in love with you." The words were simple, clear, no performance. Her eyes filled with tears she had not allowed herself for years. "I do not know how to love without fear," she confessed. "Then we will learn together." He kissed her then, not boldly, not possessively, softly, as if asking rather than claiming. And she answered. When they finally stepped from the carriage, the night air felt different, lighter. 6 months later, the wedding was not a performance. It was real. St. George's Church in Hanover Square was filled beyond expectation. Society came prepared to witness drama. Instead, they witnessed devotion. Thomas stood proudly beside his sister. Catherine and Margaret glowed with excitement. Caroline wept openly. Adrian waited at the altar, his expression steady, but full of emotion. When Eliza reached him, she saw no arrogance in his eyes. Only love. "I do," they said together. No wager, no bargain, no performance. Only choice. Years passed. Westmere Hall filled with laughter. Thomas thrived in his studies. Catherine and Margaret made their own strong matches. And Eliza learned slowly that love built on respect did not weaken. It strengthened. One autumn evening, long after their children had fallen asleep, she and Adrian walked through the gardens behind the estate. Leaves crunched beneath their steps. "Do you ever regret that race?" she asked lightly. "Never," he replied without hesitation. "It was the first time I lost and gained everything." She smiled. "And if I had refused, I would have found another way to win you," he said simply. She laughed softly. "You are still competitive." "Yes," he admitted. "But now I compete only for your smile." She slipped her hand into his. The girl who had once believed love destroyed now understood something deeper. Love did not ruin her life. Pride had started the race. Courage had turned the final corner. But trust had carried them across the true finish line, and that was the victory that changed everything.